Back in 2010, we had two children, two healthy children, Chelsea and Leah. They were aged 4 and 2 at the time. So we had intended on having three children. So we're going to have, for family planning reasons, have a break of 2 years between each child. And it was going up to have another child. So we went ahead with all that. And my wife ended up getting pregnant, to cut a long story short. And we went for our first scheduled scan in our local hospital to find out, over in Ireland, like at 3 months into the pregnancy, you go and have your first scan. So we went to that appointment, and we're getting the scan, and it was taking a bit longer than usual. So this was a bit odd. And all of a sudden, the nurse that was doing the scan went out of the room and said she'd be back in a moment. We were like, what the fuck is going on here? She came back in after a couple of minutes, and she continued on with the scan, and she told us that she had seen some fluid on the brain in the scan, which is a telltale sign that the child might have a thing called hydrocephalus, which is Latin for water on the brain. And that's a condition that goes hand in hand with a more serious condition called Spina Bifida. So we were like, what? Our jaws literally just dropped and hit the floor. We were asked to go outside into the waiting room while we waited to speak to a consultant. And we were just totally gobsmacked. I mean, say we were in complete shock. Now, we were out in the room with about 50 other people in the public waiting area, and we were just roaring our eyes out. I mean, to say the tears were flowing non-stop. Now, I'm a big, buff, burly man, like, you know what I mean? I don't generally wear my heart on my sleeve, but I mean to say, I was roaring like a bad dog. I did not know where to turn. I was inconsolable. And so was my wife. Is it unconsolable, inconsolable? I don't know. But we were in floods of tears. It was horrendous. After about half an hour, the consultant finally came down. He was an Italian guy. He must have been on call or something like that. But he confirmed it to us that after looking at the scans that it was definitely spina bifida and hydrocephalus, which he referred to as the curse of the Celts. It seems to be more prevalent in Ireland and the UK than it does in America and other parts of the world. The cause of it is when the child's spine doesn't completely form, and there's a lesion in her back, or a hole in the child's back. And as a result, depending on where the lesion is, how high up the spine, it can impact on the child's quality of life, like will she walk, will her kidneys and bladder and all that be affected. Getting back to the curse of the Celts thing as well, like I was very annoyed when he had said that, because it seemed he came across quite smart when he said it that way, like, you know what I mean? I was just furious, but I was still in floods of tears at this time. I was just raging underneath it all, but I just didn't want to confront them over it. But seemingly, one of the main reasons, now they haven't confirmed it, they can't quite pinpoint what the cause of it is, but if you take folic acid, it all reduces the chances of having a child with spina bifida. But we were taking spina bifida, my wife was taking folic acid supplements, so we couldn't understand that. But in European countries and all that, in America, I think, they introduce folic acid into bread, and they don't do that over here, so that could be an impact on why it's prevalent over here as opposed to other parts of the world, because in Ireland they don't use folic acid in the bread, as I said. But anyway, we went out to the car, we sat in the car for about an hour and a half, still crying, roaring our eyes out. It was an awful situation, like, you know what I mean? I didn't want to drive, my wife didn't want to drive. Eventually I did drive, and we said we'd go to this holy well on the way home. We were both very religious at the time, and we went to this well and we said a few prayers and lit a candle and all of this kind of stuff, like, you know, praying that they had somehow got it wrong. And it just we were clutching at straws, like, you know what I mean, hoping above all hope that this was not true. After a couple of days, we got an appointment to see a specialist in Dublin to have a proper scan, and this was the team that would be delivering the baby, and they would lay it out bare for us. So we went to see these, and they painted a very, very grim picture for us. They confirmed it was definitely spina bifida and hydrocephalus, and they were talking about all sorts of different things, like she was going to have a lemon shaped this and a banana shaped that, and again we were in floods of tears. And at that day there was a child that was born with spina bifida and all. They wanted us to go up and have a look at her and see her, and her parents had said that was okay, we could go up and do that, but I was just too emotional. I did not want to do it, and my wife didn't either. I had a million and one questions that I had to ask them, and I was wanting to know the life expectancy of a child with spina bifida and all this kind of stuff, and I had all sorts of questions and floods of emotions. Like, it was horrendous, gut wrenching stuff. Worst time of my life, I tell you that much. Um, they even mentioned at one stage up there that a lot of people who are left in that situation, they take a boat trip over to England and to terminate the pregnancy. Like, I was like, what? I couldn't believe they actually said that, because abortion in Ireland is illegal. We had a referendum here many years ago, and I remember voting on it that it's illegal to have an abortion in Ireland. But many people circumvent that by going over to England and going over to the UK and getting it done. But I couldn't believe they actually had said that, and we were adamant, no fucking way we were going to do that. Like, this is a child, going to give the best chance in life. It was our child. And so it went on for months and months of crying and praying and going back and forth for scans and all of that stuff. 9 months later, anyway, we got an appointment to go up to Dublin, and so the child would be delivered. We were up there, we went into the main ward where other women were ready to give birth and all of that, and one of the doctors came in and he broke my wife's water for her. He pulled the curtains around the bed, done whatever, he put his hand down below and he done something and he broke her water. Like, the bed was destroyed with fluid. About 5 minutes later, we were down in the labour ward and my wife gave birth. It was unbelievable how quick it was once the water broke. The baby came out. It was a girl. I couldn't believe it. I was hoping for a boy, you know what I mean? But we had two girls already. But another girl, we were delighted. Floods of tears again. Still crying all this time. As soon as she came out, she was wrapped in cling film. Like, I saw her. Like, she had a little hole in her back, in her spine at the time. And they wrapped her in cling film to prevent it from infection. Cling film, I don't know what they call it in the US. Actually, I think it's called cellophane wrap. It's something that you wrap sandwiches in or whatever like that. But cling film is what we call it over here, and they wrapped her in that to keep the lesion moist and to prevent infection. We got to hold her for a few minutes, and then she was put into intensive care in an incubator kind of set up. Sorry, now my phone's going off in the background. Apologies if you can hear that. She was put in intensive care, where there was one-to-one nurse care with her, and just to prevent infection and get her ready for surgery. The first surgery she had was to close the hole in her back, so they sealed that up and closed it up. There was more intensive care then for a couple of days to recover from that operation, and then another couple of days later there was another operation for this condition called hydrocephalus, which is to install a device called a shunt in her head. And what the shunt does is like a little valve, and it sits at the back of her ear, underneath her scalp but outside of her skull, and there's a tiny minute hole drilled into her skull that allows fluid from her skull cavity, which encapsulates the brain. It's like a shock absorber. It's called CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, or something like that. And if the shunt wasn't installed, her head would keep growing and expanding, and years ago children with that condition had huge heads, and eventually got to a point where they couldn't the head couldn't grow any bigger, and the child just died as a consequence of it. But now thankfully these days they have these devices called shunts, which drain that excess fluid back down under her skin into her belly, down through a little valve and a little pipe or a little tube into her belly. And they're life-saving devices. So she had to get that done. She was in intensive care. Not intensive care. She was in the next level down from intensive care, in another specialist unit up in Dublin, and she was recovering there for about a month while they were monitoring her fluid levels in her brain and measuring her head size and keeping an eye on her, basically. It came time to come home after about a month, and I remember at the time I had just bought a sports car that year. This was the middle of the summer, but at the start of the year I'd bought this really fast sports car, and I was loving it. But we were coming home. It was 5 p.m. It was the middle of rush hour traffic up in Dublin City, the capital of Ireland, and we got to halfway home. There's a huge bottleneck, and it takes. I remember when I was returning home from work every day, like when I used to work in Dublin, it would take you about 45 minutes in the bottleneck alone. So I was saying, no fucking way was it. It was a sweltering day. I had the air conditioning on to the last. We were still sweating it in the car, and we were in the middle of that bottleneck. I just indicated into the slow lane. I overtook every car on the left hand, on the wrong side of the road. I overtook every single car, drove the whole way down, and I bypassed the bottleneck. And I didn't give a fuck if the guards were going to stop me or anything like that, or the police. I did not care. I had an excuse. I was not keeping a child just after out of hospital after her surgeries, going to be in the back of the car with sweltering heat like that. So I put my foot down, we went ahead, and we got home quick. As soon as we arrived home, I couldn't believe the sight when we pulled up the driveway. There was about 50 people outside of our house, all our family members cheering and waving banners and all sorts of stuff, and we started crying again. You know, it was just very emotional. Like, you know, all the love and support was fantastic. Just more and more tears. We got her home. Great times. A couple of days like into it, like when we got into the daily routine and all, I made a conscious decision that I was giving up believing in God and religion of all sorts. I don't believe a child should be born into the world that is not perfect, doesn't have the same quality of life as other kids her same age, and you know, she can't walk obviously because she's disabled. Sorry if I haven't mentioned that. Because of Spina Bifida, where it was, she can't walk, so she's in a wheelchair. But we get to that in a second. I gave up believing in God. I don't believe in all that rubbish anymore, and I still respect other people's views on it. They can believe in it if they want. I just personally do not believe in it. It's just the biggest farce of all time. All the praying and all we done, nowhere the fuck. You know, child should not be born disabled is what I believe in now. I believe in science now these days. But anyway, when we came back from the hospital, we had this little card in our wallets that these signs to look out for, with the shunt in particular, to make sure that nothing happens. And keep an eye out for these particular signs, like if her eyes get sensitive to light, or her eyes start bulging, or she starts complaining more so than usual. It could be a sign there's a problem with the shunt. So about 6 months into it, once she was home, we decided that she had met all the symptoms on this card, that there was some sort of problem. So we put her into the car, sports car again. I mean to say, I put my foot to the floor, drove the whole way to Dublin. I must have been about 120 mile an hour now. I mean to say, it was unbelievable how quick we got up there. Because of the shunt, anytime it's when you go into an accident emergency department, if the child has a shunt installed, you automatically go to the top of the queue, and we got to skip everyone. So that was good. Bad for all the other children, I know, but it was good from our point of view. We got to skip the queue. They found that the shunt was actually blocked. They done a scan, and they operated on it and fixed it, and she was up there for a few days, about a week altogether recovering, and that was grand. She came home again and back to normal. Another 6 months later, the same thing happened again. So the same old rigmarole, 100 mile an hour up to Dublin, operation, recovery, back home. That was fine. About a year had passed at this point, and we noticed that she was complaining again, and it wasn't exactly the same symptoms as previously, but there was something wrong with her. So we brought her up to hospital again, rushed her up, and she was there for a month, and they could not figure out what was going on. I mean, say she was like a different child. She was like a zombie up there. Going up to see her, like my wife stayed up there with her while I was at home with the other kids, minding them and working on my job, and the child, she was unrecognisable. I couldn't believe the difference in her. The hospital's surgeons and all that, they could not figure out what was going on. So I was like, fuck this. It was going on for a month. Sorry, before I get into that, one of the TV stations, the national TV station over in Ireland, were doing a show on that hospital. It's called Temple Street Hospital, by the way. And they were doing a show on that for families and with children up in the hospital and how they get on, and they want to know that we want to get into it. And I was raging at this stage because she was up there for so long and they couldn't figure it out. So I said, there's absolutely no way I'm going to go onto TV and promote this hospital, like when the way things are going, they can't figure it out. I was just so mad. So my wife had been staying up there for a month at this stage, and I said to her, right, I'll tell you what, you go home for the weekend, I'll stay up here with Amy, and I'll seek and talk to the top doctor up there. The midwife came up, my wife went home, the midwife came out, or not the midwife, but the head nurse up there came into the ward, and I seen her, and I asked her could I have an appointment to see the top consultant up there at the time, and she said yeah, no problem at all. And I said I wasn't going to be one bit pleasant because I have a lot to get off my chest and I want to try and get to the bottom of this, like. So that's it, no problem. The following day, anyway, I woke up and about an hour later, after freshening up, I got called into the office with this top consultant. Now I walked into the office and he had a security guy with him. The fucking nurse had told him that I probably told him that I said I wasn't going to be one bit pleasant. No, I look like a rough cunt. Like people have told me in the past that I come across that way, but I wouldn't fucking hit anyone. Like, you know what I mean? Unless someone done something to me, I wouldn't physically harm them. You know, if someone physically harmed me, I'd physically harm them twice as hard. That kind of way. I'd never instantiate something like that. But I must have gave that impression. But he had a security guy with him, which was very fucking odd. But I was in there, I was getting everything off my chest. I was explaining to him that surely there's a procedure for doing these things. Like, I'm a programmer, and the way that I fix, if I had a problem with software, I would go through a list of different theories that I would have, and I'd analyze them one by one and tick them off, and I got to the bottom of the cause. And surely they could do the same when it comes to surgery and all that. So I demanded to have a thing called an MRI scan, which is this machine that they go into and they can analyse all sorts of, take pictures of her brain and all sorts of things of her. And they done that, they agreed to that. And after they done the MRI scan, they found that her shunt was blocked. After being a month in hospital, like, they found that this was the cause of it. I was like, what the fuck? So they operated on it, they fixed it, and about 2 days later, she was 100% back to herself. It was amazing. But like, I just can't understand it. Like, it took a month for him to figure that out. That month, it was a very, very tough time for me. I was minding our two other kids, and I was trying to balance. I was working in a day job at the time. I was a consultant for a software company on the way to Dublin, and trying to work that and mind the other two kids was absolutely impossible. It was so hard, especially for a month. I wouldn't mind a week or so, but doing it for a month was unbelievable. So she was home anyway. We got her first wheelchair, and it was a little small training wheelchair. Like, it wasn't a big wheelchair like you'd have nowadays, but it was a little small, little lightweight training wheelchair for going around inside, not really for outdoor use. But as soon as she sat into it, I'm going to say, you want to see the child light up. She was flying around the place. It was just instinct. She immediately put her hands on the wheels and pushed, and she was turning around. She was doing all sorts of things. I mean to say, another few tears there on that one. I was so happy that she was flying around the place and had a bit of mobility at least and a bit of independence. I found, like, we'd go around to these places like Play Zone and Kid Zone. You know, like, they have these play areas for kids where they have all these plastic balls and you jump into them and all of that. Well, like, we'd bring Amy to those with her other kids and we'd let her play in the balls. Obviously, she can't climb and all that stuff, but you go into these places and you see all the kids staring, and it was just so fucking annoying. But the other kids, like, they wouldn't know any better, like, so there's nothing you can do. I can't get onto them, but it's generally people would be looking at her and doting over her, you know what I mean? They can't believe it's such a small child in a wheelchair. But it's part of life, like, you know what I mean? We have to deal with it now, and we put up with it. People know her now, they've gotten used to it anyway, so it's just the other people that have the problem by staring, but hopefully they'll get over that. One of the perks of the whole thing is we got a disabled parking permit, so we have this badge that we can now put up in the window of our Jeep, and we can park in those disabled spots. It's very, I don't know how to put it. It's great having it. I'm always looking, like, obviously you get to park in all the best spots, but now what I'm doing is I'm always looking out for people that are parked in those spots that shouldn't be. Because what I do is I park the Jeep right behind them and don't let them move, and I go out and I do my business and I come back and then I move my Jeep. Now, it hasn't happened yet that someone has come back and they've been blocked in because of me, but I'm waiting the day when they do come back and they find that they're blocked in because of my Jeep. I will fucking crease the fuckers over it. But that's one of the perks of it. I remember at the time Black Ops 2 had come out as well, and I was playing that a lot, and you know where they have the custom emblem editor on that, and a lot of people had that disabled icon, you know, the blue badge, the disabled icon, and I put a picture up on the screen. They had that on it, and every time I saw it I would just report them, and I'd get on the mic and I'd get onto them, like I say, how dare you go on that and insult disabled people like that, you know. I was very emotional over it, without being emotional, but you know what I mean, like, I was very hurtful, and I get onto them and I give them a telling off over it. How would they feel if they had a child that was like that? And 9 times out of 10 the people would just back out the lobby, or they would just mute me or whatever. But I always gone to him. You probably saw in a few videos previously that, or back in the day when I was doing Black Ops 2, that I used to give out about that quite a bit. Those disabled emblems. But anyway, rambling on. She was training in the wheelchair, in the training wheelchair for about a year, and then she got a proper wheelchair then after that. And that's actually going for adjustment now in the next couple of weeks, actually, would you believe? She has a proper wheelchair now, flying around the place. She can go outside in it, go all over the place. Really good, really rugged. And there's a rim on it that she doesn't get her hands dirty when she's pushing the wheels. And it's all good. Amy started school there a couple of months ago, back in September. I'll throw a picture up on screen. You see how happy she is. First day in school there, that's it. You know, I don't know, it's just amazing, like the look on her face. That's why she goes around the whole time, you know. A couple of weeks ago, she had to go for another shunt revision, would you believe? This is probably going to be an ongoing thing, where she goes back and forth to the hospital to get these shunt revisions. It's going to be part of life. She probably has one of them every year, I'd say. It's probably part of growing up, I don't know. Child with a shunt, have to get it revised every so often. But we were down in hospital. One of my daughters was down in hospital for getting an appendix operation. So we went down to pay her a visit. My wife was down with my daughter who was having the operation, and I was minding her other two kids. Amy, one of them. And so I brought them down to see their sister in hospital. And we were down in hospital, we were playing around, having the right laugh, joking and laughing and playing, and Amy was in right form. Amy is, by the way, is my child's name, who's disabled. And she was in fits of giggles down there, but about an hour down there into it, all of a sudden Amy got very sick and she started grabbing at her head and her belly and, you know, acting up very, very strange, very out of character. So, yeah, we're down there in hospital. We said we'd ask the nurse, would they mind having a look at her and just see if there's something going on, because she doesn't act like that normally. So lo and behold, they took her clothes off, they took blood from her, they sent her for a scan, they done all sorts of things. They sampled her urine, and it was decided that she should be rushed to Dublin, because they believed there was some sort of problem with the shunt again. So an ambulance was called, and she was put into an ambulance with my wife. So the two ambulance men, my wife, Amy, a doctor and a nurse, had to go all the way up to Dublin from Wexford, our local hospital. And lo and behold, they found it was actually her shunt was blocked and she had to get it revised. She was up in hospital for about a week altogether recovering. She had the operation about a few hours after she arrived up there, but she was recovering for about a week after it. The shunt was found to be blocked. Cut a long story short, back up to today now. Amy has a great personality. She's very bright and bubbly, a very, very funny child. She's the cutest, most adorable child of all time, and everyone loves her and dotes over her. I know everyone, you're going to say that about your own kids, but I mean to say, like, I have other kids. I love my other kids to death as well, don't get me wrong. But Amy, there's something about her, like, I know she's the youngest and all that, and she has her special needs, but she's the most adorable, cutest child of all time, and she's funny, so funny, so funny. What she lacks for the mobility, she's going to make up for it with her mind. I'm convinced of it. She's going to be the best web developer after her daddy of all time, and she's going to be the best Call of Duty player ever as well. So she won't be able to play sports, but she'll be the best at computer games if I have my way. And we're giving her the best life possible as well. And everyone, we're looking after her to the last. The moral of the story then, to come to the end of it, is that some of you young people that are watching this video might face similar scenarios in life. I strongly urge you to take it on the chin and get over it. Deal with it. Take it as it happens and deal with it. If you get into that scenario where you have a child that's going to be disabled, do not even think of abortion. Children that are disabled and have special needs are the most loving, doting things of all time. I mean to say, I wouldn't change Amy for the world. Obviously, I'd love if she could walk. I'd love that. But I wouldn't change her for the world. She's an absolute lovable thing. That's it, lads. That's the video. I'd always appreciate your feedback. Click that like button. Subscribe if you haven't. I always love to hear your comments and feedback. Sorry for being so long-winded, but that's the story for this week. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.